So let's set the scene. It's June 12th, 2025. Air India flight AI-171, a brand new Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner.
Just departing Ahmedabad, India, should have been, completely routine.
Exactly. But then, well, an almost unimaginable sequence of events unfolds.
Unimaginable is the word.
Just 17 seconds after its wheels leave the runway, the aircraft starts this steep, unrecoverable descent.
17 seconds. It's incredibly fast.
And then, crashing into a medical hostel only 33 seconds after takeoff. Total time, wheels up to impact, less than a minute.
Catastrophic loss of life.
Yeah.
Just devastating. 241 people on board and around 30 on the ground as well.
And only one reported survivor and all that.
It's a tragedy that, it truly hits hard. And that speed, the sheer rapidity of it all is utterly shocking.
Yeah.
It immediately put this incident right at the top of the priority list for the global aviation community.
You're absolutely right. The urgency is, well, you can feel it. And that's precisely why you, our listener, send us these sources about this really critical incident. So our mission today is to unpack the facts, look at these initial findings, and explore the profound questions surrounding what is actually the first fatal crash of a Boeing 787.
Right. A major milestone, unfortunately.
And this isn't just about what happened. It's about what the early evidence seems to be suggesting, the really unprecedented nature of some of these suspected failures.
And what everyone's doing right now to figure it out.
Exactly. The immediate collaborative actions. This is a deep dive into these rapid investigations and, frankly, the huge implications for air safety.
Indeed. It really shows how quickly investigators have to mobilize when something like this happens, piecing things together from the very first moments.
Okay, so let's really get into the nitty-gritty of those initial moments then. Flight AI-171 departing Ahmedabad's Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport.
Seemed like a normal takeoff initially.
Right. But then, as we said, the timeline just compresses incredibly.
That's the critical part, the part that just jumps out from all the sources. It starts that steep descent only 17 seconds after takeoff.
17 seconds.
And then just 33 seconds after the wheels left the ground, impact into that medical hostel. It was a terrifyingly swift, uncontrollable event.
And the human cost, as we touched on, it's just heartbreaking. At least 241 lives lost on board.
And then tragically, maybe 30 more on the ground where it crashed.
It really underscores the human tragedy here. A community absolutely shattered, and that one survivor amidst all that devastation.
Which raises the immediate, very important question. What are the early clues telling us? What could have gone wrong in those critical seconds?
Yeah.
The investigation, it very quickly turned its focus to some really unusual signs for such a modern aircraft.
Okay, this is where the mystery really starts to deepen. And it does get a bit technical, but it's crucial. One of the most significant pieces of early evidence involves something called the Ram Air Turbine, the RAT.
The RAT, right. For listeners who might not know, the RAT is basically a small propeller. It drops out of the plane in an emergency.
Yeah, like a little windmill.
Exactly. And its job is to generate backup hydraulic or electrical power if, and this is the key part, if the main engines or electrical systems completely fail mid-flight. It's a last resort system.
But what's truly remarkable here, almost unbelievable, is that video and audio evidence seems to suggest the RAT activated early, like right during the takeoff phase.
Which is, it's not just unusual. For a modern redundant aircraft like the 787 during takeoff, it's practically unheard of.
So what does that imply?
It implies something catastrophic happened immediately. It suggests maybe not just one engine failure, but potentially a dual engine failure or some kind of massive electrical or hydraulic breakdown right as the plane needed maximum power to climb.
Wow.
This isn't just one system failing. It points towards a potential near instantaneous failure of primary and critical backup systems that really challenges the whole philosophy of layered safety in these planes.
And to back that up, the pilots did get a Mayday call out.
They did, specifically confirming a loss of thrust.
And critically, the videos, they show the aircraft starting its decline without any visible fire.
Right. Which suggests it probably wasn't an immediate catastrophic engine fire, but more likely a sudden severe power problem, like the engines just stopped producing enough thrust.
Okay, so that's one major puzzle piece. What else?
Another really perplexing detail, something that immediately raised red flags for investigators, was the landing gear.
The landing gear. What about it?
The sources indicate the landing gear, and possibly the flaps too, stayed extended after takeoff. They didn't retract as they should have.
Okay, why is that so significant?
Well, think of the landing gear and extended flaps like giant air brakes. On a huge plane like the Dreamliner, having them out drastically increases drag, maybe triples it.
Right, makes it much harder to fly.
Exactly. It means the engines need way more power just to stay level, let alone climb efficiently. So if you combine that massive drag with any kind of power loss issue.
Ah, okay. That becomes an immediate critical problem. It would make it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for the aircraft to gain altitude.
Precisely. So even if the engines hadn't completely failed, just having the gear down could be a major issue. But combine it with a suspected loss of thrust, that's an emergency right there.
So, a potential double whammy, loss of thrust, and massive drag. Now, what's India's aviation authority, the DGCA, saying about all this in their initial assessments?
Well, their preliminary stance is really important here, especially given how quickly they assess things. They've stated they haven't found any structural or systemic issues across the entire 787 Dreamliner fleet.
Okay, so not necessarily a fundamental design flaw affecting all 787s?
Correct, at least not based on initial checks. However, they are absolutely focusing on individual mechanical or engine failures on this specific aircraft. That's under intense scrutiny.
And Boeing and GE Aerospace, the engine maker, they're involved.
Oh, absolutely. They're actively collaborating with the investigation teams, which brings us to the broader picture, really.
The global response.
Right.
Because something like this, it's never just one country's issue, is it?
Not at all. The hunt for answers becomes a truly international effort straight away. The black boxes, the flight data recorder, and cockpit voice recorder, they were recovered quickly, thankfully. That's always step one.
Crucial data there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And now you've got Indian and American teams working side by side. India's DGCA, the US NTSB, the FAA.
The big players.
Right. All working together with experts from Boeing and GE to analyze every bit of that data.
That sounds like a massive undertaking. And beyond just investigating this crash, what immediate steps did India's DGCAG take for the other 787s flying in India?
They moved very fast on that. The DGCA ordered immediate fleet-wide inspections of all Boeing 787s operating in India. That's about 33 aircraft.
All of them.
All of them. Things like power assurance checks on the engines. They'd already completed those on 26 planes shortly after the incident, with the rest ongoing. It's a standard but vital safety precaution.
And Air India itself, the airline involved, how did they adjust things operationally?
Air India, well, they took proactive steps too. They temporarily reduced their wide-body flights, the bigger planes, like the 787, by about 15%.
Okay.
And they paused certain routes. It just allows them to manage their fleet, focus on the safety checks, give maximum attention to the aircraft still flying.
And that intensified scrutiny. We're talking about checks on systems that are normally considered incredibly reliable, right?
Absolutely. There's a huge focus now on engines, obviously, thrust systems, hydraulics, and naturally those Ram Air Turbine mechanisms.
The RAT, yeah.
Every potential area that could even remotely have contributed to such a rapid, catastrophic failure is getting re-examined with extreme care.
Which brings us squarely back to Boeing, the manufacturer. This crash, tragically, puts them under a massive microscope. Especially given, as you said, the grim milestone this represents for the Dreamliner.
It really does. It's critical to remember this is the first fatal crash involving the Boeing 787 since it started flying passengers back in 2011.
Over a decade of service.
Right. For a relatively young aircraft program, one that really prides itself on advanced tech and safety, this is a major, deeply distressing event.
And the suspected nature of the failure, that potential dual-engine failure hinted at by the RAT, as you explained, that's just so unusual, so unprecedented for a modern twin-engine jet. Can you elaborate a bit more on why that's so shocking?
It's shocking because these planes are built with layer upon layer of redundancy. Dual engine failure on takeoff is exceptionally rare. Usually you think maybe massive bird strikes hitting both engines, or perhaps contaminated fuel affecting both.
Right, external factors.
Exactly. But for it to happen potentially because of some internal system failure, maybe electrical, maybe mechanical, causing both engines to lose thrust, and deploying the R8 so early, it implies that not just the main power sources failed, but critical backups might have failed almost instantly too.
Which undermines the whole safety philosophy.
It challenges the core principles of layered safety, of independent backup systems that modern aviation absolutely relies on. It's why this is such a focus.
And this incident, well, it inevitably casts a new light on some prior warnings or concerns, doesn't it?
It certainly brings them back into focus. There was a Boeing whistleblower who had previously raised some specific concerns, issues related to the 787's fuselage manufacturing, potential structural weak points, and also some potential electrical system vulnerability.
Right? I remember hearing about that.
Now, it is crucial not to jump to conclusions and say that is the cause here. We don't know that yet.
Of course.
But when you have an unprecedented suspected failure, like this maybe electrical, maybe dual engine related, investigators absolutely have to revisit those earlier claims very, very carefully. They'll be looking at those areas with a magnifying glass now.
So another layer of scrutiny for the investigation. But let's be clear. Boeing and GE, they are fully cooperating, assisting the investigators.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Both companies are providing full cooperation, offering technical expertise, access to data, whatever the investigative teams need. That's standard practice.
Okay.
But it's also important to note, neither company has made any public admission of, a specific failure or defect being the cause at this stage. Their involvement is part of the standard collaborative process in any accident investigation.
Understood. So with all this data being gathered, these initial findings, the collaboration, what are the next steps? What's the path forward to really understanding what happened here?
Well, the immediate next step is just exhaustive analysis. Poring over every millisecond of data from the flight data recorder, every sound on the cockpit voice recorder.
Analyzing the CCTV footage from the ground, too, I imagine.
Absolutely. And critically examining all the evidence related to that R8 deployment. When did it deploy? Why? Every single piece of information has to be fitted into the puzzle to build a complete, accurate picture.
And when can we realistically expect some answers? I mean, is there a typical timeline for this kind of complex investigation?
Timelines are always hard to predict exactly, but you might see some initial findings, maybe a preliminary report, emerge relatively quickly, perhaps within 30 days or so.
Okay, that's quite fast.
But that's just preliminary. The full, comprehensive report, the one that aims to establish the definitive probable causes that could easily take up to a year, maybe even longer.
A year. Wow.
These investigations have to be incredibly meticulous. Rushing to conclusions helps no one. Accuracy and thoroughness are paramount.
So what's the ultimate goal of that final report? What does it achieve?
The final report is absolutely crucial. Its main job is to identify the probable cause, or often causes. Was it engine failure? Was it a systems fault? Was pilot error a factor? Very often, it's a complex combination of things.
Right. Rarely just one single thing.
Exactly. And perhaps even more importantly, the report will include vital safety recommendations. These will be directed at Boeing, at GE, at airlines, and at aviation regulators worldwide.
To prevent anything similar from happening again.
Precisely. The ultimate goal is always to learn the lessons and use them to advance global aviation safety for everyone.
This deep dive into the Air India 787 crash, it really drives home just how complex modern aviation safety is, doesn't it?
It really does.
We've looked at the incredibly rapid, tragic sequence of events, those early clues pointing to potentially highly unusual failures, the RAT deployment, the landing gear issue.
And the immediate coordinated global response from investigators, regulators, manufacturers.
It's clearly a situation with many, many layers, and the investigation is still very much ongoing. Lots of work ahead.
It definitely underscores that intricate balance, between cutting-edge technology, the human element in the cockpit and on the ground, and that rigorous regulatory oversight that's needed to keep flying as safe as it is.
Yeah.
Every incident, no matter how rare or tragic, unfortunately offers critical lessons. Lessons that are used to constantly redefine and improve safety standards across the board.
So that leaves us, and you, the listener, with something to think about. Given the unprecedented nature of some of these suspected failures in this incident, what enduring lessons might we draw about the critical importance of continuous innovation, rigorous testing, and maybe the ongoing challenge of anticipating the unexpected in systems as complex as modern aircraft?